Hi, this is Philip Roberts vlogging from my video game design and cultural practice class, and this is my vlog for Superbug. Superbug is a game about defeating bacteria in a petri dish using antibiotics before they build up resistance and you lose. Visually, the game is fairly clear and simple. Bacteria are represented on the screen in your petri dish in several different colors, with red bacteria being unable to be popped normally by your antibiotics. Administering antibiotics is represented by a bubble that appears when you press down that grows larger the longer you hold it. There is a new antibiotic gauge on the right that goes up the longer that you play. A mortality gauge to the left that goes up the more bacteria there is in the petri dish. When it fills up, you lose. And time, which is also your score, is at the top. I'll get into it a little more later, but I guess one of the things that irked me about this game is that there's no real reason for the different colors of bacteria besides for the different colors in red. I mean, it certainly looks pretty having the different yellows, blues, and greens and purples, but there isn't any meaningful gameplay difference that I was able to tell. The major thing is just that you're supposed to knock out the stuff that's closest to the red bacteria, as this supposedly will spread pretty quickly. I'm not sure if this is true or not, just having played it for a little bit, but I'll get into that. For the sonic and audio design, it's functional. Everything has satisfying clicks and pops that go along with the different actions that you perform and the music. Well, it's more of a hospital room kind of soundtrack in the background, but it's functional. This is a mobile game and the interactions are fairly simple. Press down to administer antibiotics, hold down for a more powerful effect. This will also expand the radius of the antibiotics you're administering and affect your antibiotic gauge. What's recommended by the creators of the game is to wait for your antibiotic gauge to fill up all the way. That way you can administer a full, powerful dose of antibiotics. Sometimes you can kill a few bacteria cells with just a quick press, but as they get larger, this is less effective. The thing that balances this, though, is that if you're able to completely clear the petri dish, you get to time skip ahead, which is your scoring system. Additionally, it takes more time to research new antibiotics to destroy red bacteria, or rather enable them to be destroyed, as you still have to hit them with a dose of antibiotics after enabling them to work. It seems the longer the game goes, the more quickly bacteria will turn into red bacteria, as well as growing quicker. The more new antibiotics you use and research, the slower it is for a new antibiotic to be researched again. So what inevitably happens is you reach critical mass and your mortality rate goes up and your person dies. Game over. This is probably all the real narrative that's actually contained within the game. There's a little bit of more information if you go outside of it and look at their website that talks about what the purpose of the game is, and a little bit in the tutorials that explain it. Essentially, the game is trying to represent antibiotic resistance, and it may or may not be successful both from a gameplay standpoint and from a narrative standpoint in accomplishing this. Again, mechanically, there's not much going on in this game besides for holding down and tapping on the screen. This is pretty typical of mobile games. I'm struggling because I wouldn't really say this is a difficult game to play or get into, but it does snowball out of control to keep everything contained, and that can be difficult. I'd say there's a little bit of an addicting quality to it, but it ultimately didn't hold my interest for a long time. I'm just not sure if the real mechanics and interactions behind this are as deep as they claim it to be, and that kind of resulted me in feeling that parts of it were a little unfair and not really reflective of my skill or critical thinking. For example, supposedly the red resistant bacteria will spread quickly to other bacteria nearby. However, what I kind of noticed is that once red bacteria appeared on the screen, well, they kind of just seemed to randomly spread to anything on the screen, which was a little frustrating. That kind of removes the supposed strategy of keeping it contained to one corner. The other thing I kind of found weird is that there's all these different colors of bacteria, but there's no way to really target them by color, and it doesn't really play anything into the mechanics and interactions of the game. It would be interesting if the different colors represented different strains of bacteria, and so the individual strains would be resistant to different antibiotics, and you could then try to administer those. So essentially you'd have to weigh the pros and cons of effectiveness versus the different strains of bacteria. This is all leading into the next point about our module, which is global and national issues. Again, we know from what they say and some of the information presented in the game that it's trying to simulate antibiotic resistance, which I do think it accomplishes. It just isn't necessarily in a way that's meaningful from a gameplay perspective. Its way of increasing complexity is to just add more stuff going at you, in the sense that more bacteria will turn red quicker and it will grow quicker, and you'll have less resources to deal with it. And you know, that's okay for an arcadey style game, but it also means that no matter how skilled you are, eventually you're just going to fail. As I mentioned, I think there are other ways that this could be a little more complex and introduced in a way that's still meaningful and actually supports the thesis of the entire game to begin with. The tutorial at the beginning is very simple and just showing a few key mechanics, and it would be very easy to add on to this. I think that would promote more deeper and meaningful gameplay than what's present at the moment.